All right. I'll start off by telling you all that I am always apologizing to my children. I don't know if this is just me, but yesterday I'm talking to my daughter, Annabelle. She's 8 years old, and I'm apologizing because I'm rushing her out of the house, morning routine. She wakes up early, and yet we still can't get out of the house on time, even though she wants to get to school on time. And so maybe it's all the yoga I've been doing, I don't know, but I'm always apologizing, like explaining, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to overreact. And she goes, well, you're not as bad as my friend's mom. She does her homework with her and she screams at her. I was like, I know that, Mom, and I'm pretty sure that's not true. But I go into this, you don't understand the pressures of being a parent or, sometimes. And she goes, no, Mom, I know. You get to midlife and you wake up one day, you look around, you go, is this all there is? I was like, what? Like, where did you hear that? And it's funny because I think she's right, I think we're all craving purpose. At least I know I am, craving like a bigger thing that our life is about, right? And it's also sad, right? Because she's 8 years old and she's like thinking this way. And, she's already written a letter to Scott Morrison about the bushfires, and she's done a speech at school about plastic in the oceans. I was just like, now coronavirus, right? The dirty word. And I'm just thinking, like, when I was 8 years old, my biggest worry was like, is my brother going to let me watch the Chipmunks, or is it like going to be like a Thundercats afternoon for me, right? So, we all want to make stuff that matters, right? We want to do it. And I think the world needs us to make stuff that matters more than ever. And I actually would argue that your companies will thank you if you make stuff that matters. So let me figure out how to use this. So why? Like, why is it? That's why we want to do it, of course, but why is it so hard, right? Okay, this is not coming up the way. Could you guys see? My back slide is missing, but what should have been on this slide is a unicorn. And what I would ask you is, if you've seen the movie Field of Dreams, they say, if you build it, they will come, right? And you guys are all marketers. I'm gonna guess, has anyone been asked to create a viral piece of content? That magical unicorn? Imagine it, it's beautiful, magical. It performs amazingly, costs no money to produce, and no paid media required. Just build something viral, right? So can I ask you all to stand up? It's 4 o'clock. We're all a bit tired, right? Maybe just pumped full of caffeine. So why is it so hard? Okay, so I'd like you to sit down if you can't remember an ad that you saw yesterday. Pretty good, pretty good. You guys are marketers. I know you pay attention. But the truth is, research has shown we forget 70% in one day. So good job for those guys still standing. Now I want you to sit down if you've looked at your phone since I started speaking. Oh, that is so harsh. What's it been, like 3 minutes? Well, most people, average people, can't go 10 minutes without looking at their phone, and 1 in 10 people can't go 4 minutes without looking at their phone. And now I want you to sit down if you've been to more than 20 websites in the past 48 hours, let's say.
Sorry, say again?
Have you been to more than 20 websites in the last 24 hours, let's say?
20 times?
Oh, we've lost everybody. That's amazing. There are 3.8 million searches every day. And, I was also going to ask any amazingly, focused individuals that, had watched Netflix or any streaming TV, if they've looked, through Netflix and not found anything they can watch. And usually I get the last person on that because frankly, the paradox of choice is like, even though we have all this stuff, sometimes we can't even decide. And in Australia, I pulled a stat yesterday that said, we're spending over $35 a month on an average of 2 streaming services, and we're watching about 12 plus hours of content. And they think with the sports fans, that could be even much higher. So, if you build it, the unicorn, they likely won't come, right? Because people are distracted. We've got a tough job. And so one of the reasons, I'm losing the charts for some reason, but what it says is that we forget 50% after 1 hour. We forget 70% after 1 day, and we actually forget 90% after 1 week. So people really only remember 10%. So even if you get their attention, they're gonna forget most of it. And I seem to be missing pretty much all my charts, so this is gonna make this interesting. Probably should have done a test beforehand. We could have done that, but. The image here, really what I was trying to talk about is that we know clients want, things on demand. They want it faster. They want things, live experiences. And it was a picture of people actually walking in traffic, reading their phones, right? How many people have crossed the street looking at their phone? And this is the situation where the picture I pulled was actually from a news article in Australia saying that they're going to fine us now for looking at our phone while we cross the street. And so, the customers also changed. There's a survey, I'll show you some stats in a moment, by Edelman, they call the Trust Barometer. Has anyone heard of it? Really very cool to check out. It actually shows that trust in organizations has dropped. That includes governments, businesses, NGOs, media. People don't know who to trust. They don't really trust anybody. And they really are feeling like it's time for business to step up. And that's where I think this is pretty cool. So I have one chart at least. Some of the things that show up, and these are Australian statistics, are that people are asking brands to do more. So first off, 89% of people surveyed in Australia have growing concerns about the environment. Makes sense, right? We've gone through a pretty hellish time in the last quarter. I live here 14 years, never seen anything like it. And people are worried about other things too. AI taking our jobs is one example. So 80% are worried about losing their jobs for a multiple list of reasons, but that being one of them. But 78% think CEOs should take the lead on change and not wait for government. So that's up 13 points year to year. And they did these surveys after the bushfire crisis. So, I think they did a special report to see what's changed in Australia since this happened. And then 76% believe that a brand's ethics are more important. So they basically asked you, when it comes to business, do you want to work with a company that's ethical or competent? And people don't really believe that businesses are both ethical and competent. They believe they're competent, but they're lacking in ethical. So what's cool about this, right? You want to make stuff that matters? Clients are asking for it. Your consumers, your clients, if you're in B2B like me, they want us to make change. So what makes great content? So let's see if my video plays. No? Okay. One more time. All right. Well, what I was going to show you was a video of a recent project we did with 8 Bar Collective, which includes Ogilvy. If you guys know the Ogilvy agency, I used to work there as well, where we're talking about a project we're doing in Kenya to help with water. We're basically putting water sensors on wells. And what that's doing is helping people to identify when a well drill pipe is broken so that they can go out and repair them. Because, water crisis is an issue in Africa, obviously a huge issue. But even when they put in a well, there's a continuing issue that they break. And when they break, the locals just stop using them and they continue to hike to the next one. And so the point of the video was to show you a different way of telling a story. So rather than starting with, this is the technology we're doing, it tells the story. It starts with a woman walking through the desert, dragging her watering can behind her and bringing herself all the way, half a day's walk to this well, only to find that it doesn't work. And, it's probably not, I don't know if that's something that you would expect from a company like IBM, a technology company. But why that's important, and where I think we start with great content, of course the client, of course the human story that relates to the client we're trying to reach. But I'd argue that it's also really important to start with your values as a company. Because, when in IBM, why does that matter for us? Well, one, it's about dedication to every client's success, but it's also about, stuck to the stage, innovation that matters for our company and for the world. And so why is that innovation that matters? Well, Kenya Water, wow. Do you guys see anything? Am I not seeing images? Okay. It's innovation that matters because there is a global water crisis, right? There's a global water crisis. It's not just an Africa problem. There's a global water crisis throughout Asia Pac. And of course, in Australia, this last image was of the Murray River Basin with a bunch of sheep grazing on pretty much the bottom of a lake, which is just mud, not even wet mud, right? So I'm preaching to the choir here as Australians. You guys know firsthand the issues we're facing with water. Oh, we have an image. This thing is possessed. Now I can't go back. But anyway, that was the sheep. So, here's was one example of how you could tell a story of a technology solution, but tell it in a way that's human, compelling, and still authentic to our brand values. So, compelling content, what is it? I would argue that it's human story that matters to an audience, right? It's based in a human truth. And by the way, if you use story, it's actually 22 times more effective than facts alone. Facts sometimes can actually backfire when you're trying to convince someone to change their belief about you or about a situation. And finally, back to that core point, have a brand purpose. Because if you don't do that, I think it can be really tempting to just keep changing with the market, being whatever the client wants you to be. And that can lead to inauthentic representation, right? If you keep flip-flopping, one day you're this cool company and the next day you're, the trusted advisor, but not cool. Clients, they're going to say, I don't know, this company, the trust issue is going to be there. So these three components. And so how? Yay. If you look at that grounded idea, right? If you take that grounded idea, now you can extend it across the content ecosystem. So what does this mean to me? It means you can make less and matter more, which is something that we're really trying to do in IBM, especially with our new IBM Originals content studio for the last couple of years. It's not about just blasting the market with brand new things all the time. We're trying to find grounded ideas, that are true to our brand values, and then extend those ideas in really creative ways across all different types of experiences. So, in one example here, the Kenya story, you could deliver it across different types of assets, and it could be supported by advertising. So one of the things we're also trying to do is take things that typically would work in traditional advertising and figure out how to extend them across the content ecosystem. I've got some live banners, look at that. Here's a few other formats, some short formats telling the story. It's really weird which ones work and which ones don't. I don't know. All right, and then you've got other types of formats, right? Instagram stories. Here's a story that lends itself to Instagram. There are a lot of things that, traditionally we might do in technology that Nobody really wants showing up in their Instagram account, right? But if you're talking about something, a global water crisis and how we can all, hero the companies that are trying to solve this problem, and I'm not talking about heroing IBM in this situation, I'm talking about, some of our partners, then, I think people really want to help. And so we're really creating stuff that matters. At least that's the intent. Here's another example when I talked about taking things into non-traditional spaces. I mean, there are agencies that specialize in brand amps or interactive experiences. But I think, this is really an underused area right now for most companies. And, this is one example. IBM played a big part in the moon landing, which was 50-year anniversary last year. And so one of the things we did was set up these what we call brand amps with the 8-Bar Collective team across different cities. So in this one, for example, you can sit down in like the 1950s, 60s couch and watch it on the TV and try to get a feeling for what it was like for those people as they, watched the moon landing. Other types of things, this is, we are doing a lot of work around water. And so here's something we're doing where, we took a leather handbag and we actually froze it in the amount of water that it takes to create. And people don't often realize, the water cost of the things they buy. And here there's also an example of an Amazon attachment where you could download that and it'll show you the products that you're looking at on Amazon, what's the water cost associated with them. So people are more informed. And I'd be remiss if I didn't talk about the power you have within your own internal employee army when you get behind stories like this. When you pick the stories that are about changing the world, your employees are proud, right? They want to share them. It doesn't feel like, tweet out this new product launch or, you're trying to, infect their social network with corporate speak. It feels like something that they can give their own unique point of view and share with their network. So beyond the things I talked about, there are a few things I think in great content marketing you have to think about. Content is awesome because it is flipping the funnel, right? It's about serving an audience with value. And so in order to do that, you really have to think about the whole journey to build relationships, right? Something that as product marketers, we've been doing for a long time, but others better than others. It's agile, right? Content marketing is certainly about seeding content, optimizing, and amplifying the things that work. So data is really important. And one lesson that I've definitely learned over the years is just because you create something great or you think it's great doesn't mean it's going to work. Every piece of content should get created with a marketing plan. You can't just create something and hope it's viral. I hope it is for you, but it's a bad strategy. So here's an example of another company we work with. Speaking of ocean plastic, my daughter's concern, Plastic Bank is this amazing story. This company that actually went into poverty-stricken areas like Philippines or Africa and figured out that if you think about plastic pollution as you walk into your kitchen and there's a flood because your sink's turned on, would you just grab a towel and just start, sort of drying the floor? No, right? The first thing you would do is turn the tap off. And so what David Katz and Sean at Plastic Bank, these amazing founders, figured out is that if they could turn plastic into currency, they could create a model where people would bring them plastic because, recycling is not a priority in a poverty-stricken country, right? So people were dumping plastic everywhere, but now they were allowing them to collect it, bring it to the bank, and trade it for a bank account with their name. And then, things in the bank account that were valuable, like services, schooling for their kids, fuel for their kitchens. They could deposit plastic in one part of the city, and the grandmother in the family could then access fuel for the stove from another part of the city, because they were digitizing these people in a trusted blockchain that we built with them. But as far as the content goes, again, great story, right? You think tells itself, but imagery, having those amazing founders on stage at some of the largest events, and then doing some unique content formats, journalistic style is something that we're really experimenting with, is another thing we could look at. And then I just wanted to leave you with a few, these are probably more traditional commercials, but I think to just try to, again, have you think about that idea that make stuff that matters. It's not necessarily just about hits, right? I think if we want to answer what consumers are looking for, these brands with ethics, there are different ways to tell these stories and causes that we basically, I think as marketers, we can actually encourage our company to start some of these projects and then imagine the stories and content we could get out of those situations. So here's a couple. No sound. And this one is a story about local communities. It's like a silent film. I wonder if I would probably embarrass myself if I tried to voice over it. But again, a story here about how we're working with homeless organizations, organizations that help the homeless in California, giving them data and access to things so that they can take inventory, figure out, when they've got availability, where they have overflow, how to deal with those kinds of situations. And then this is kind of one of our Dear Tech. Gonna play it. It's probably not gonna have any sounds. Now, lesson for me, always check your slides during the break. But this has a few famous people in it. It's probably 6 months old now. But because we don't have a lot of, I don't know if you guys have seen this in the Australian market, we don't necessarily do a lot of traditional advertising. But I thought it was a nice way, because it's talking Dear Tech is what it's called. You can Google it if you're interested. But it's talking about, we expect more of technology. We have these big problems in the world, and we expect technology to help us with them. So it's a Dear Tech letter that we're writing to technology, asking for help with these big problems.
Tara, we do have a few questions if you'd like to.
All right. Yeah, sure.
So first up, how does a company maintain authenticity when it's creating content?
Ooh, tough one, yeah. I'd argue that, again, it's about staying true to your values, right? So one of the big things I see happening right now, and I'm sure you're all feeling this, is that every company is getting on the For Good bandwagon, right? So I flew to Singapore a couple months ago. Don't be too scared of me. It was like the bank that, how they play the ads before your movie comes on? It was like the bank was saving endangered animals, and then like the jewelry company was like helping the ocean, get cleaner. And so sometimes, you kind of got to roll your eyes, right? Like, is this for real? So you can't be making claims that aren't true. If you're a smaller company, picking the corporate service thing that you guys want to get behind and then building something real behind it is important. In IBM, it's important for us to make sure, even if we're working with small organizations, that we've got a long-term plan to help them. It's not just a one-off, put a commercial out and then see you later. So if that helps.
Another question here. What were the measures of success for the water campaign, and did it meet them?
For which campaign? The water campaign? Oh, good one. Yeah. Well, I'd say it's still ongoing. I think that it did definitely have awareness measures attached to it. I was not personally in Kenya when it launched, so I could pull the data, and if anybody wants to let me know who asked the question, I'd be happy to follow up with you and let you know. But yeah, it was built with targets associated with awareness, engagement, and then I don't know that it went into revenue specifically. I don't think it did. But it's a good point, because as we extend into these other content formats and you start to put paid media behind things, you need them to perform, right? We all know that we don't have a budget for things that don't have revenue return. So,
another good question here. You talk about organization's values. Someone wants to know, out of interest, what is IBM's brand purpose?
Oh, our brand purpose. Well, I'd argue those three things that we put up are our values. You know, for the 100+ years we've been in business, we say that we want to be essential to every client's success. I saw someone else put that up today. So, you know, it is always meant to be about the customer. And I'd argue in the modern world about the customer's customer. So being essential to, you know, making them successful. And, you know, our big brand campaign for some time now has been Smarter Planet. Let's make a smarter planet. The current brand campaign is actually Smart Loves Problems, that people hate problems, but we actually believe that, you know, problems challenge us and, you know, they make us think outside the box. And I think people are looking to tech to solve some of the biggest problems we have right now. So last slide, just wanted to let you guys know we have our Call for Code challenge going on. It is for developers, but, you know, frankly, this is one example where last year's winner actually came up with a solution to help first responders. So Prometeo, which is a Spanish company, has put sensors on firefighters, police officers, and then track that data so that if they're injured in the field, people can actually rush to their aid. It's something that, you know, those organizations have been challenged with, and we're actually also helping Prometeo now talk to the fireys in Australia about how we can bring the technology to Australia. So one example, Call for Code this year is about climate change and what we can do around that. So check it out. And then, yeah, there's my information. I'd love to connect with you guys. Thank you for being patient with my lack of slides. But I know you're all creative, so you can see it.
Thank you, Tara.
Cheers.